Okay, let's jump into this deep dive. Today, we're exploring a incredibly raw and honest first-person narrative titled Elodie's Confidence is the Crack. This source, shared by one of you, our listeners, is really a deep dive into a single personal story. It traces a path through trust, attraction, choice, betrayal, and eventually, healing. Our mission here is to walk through Elodie's experience from beginning to end. I want to pull out the most important moments and the profound insight she shares about what happened and why. We're aiming for a really detailed, clear, and precise understanding of her journey, laid out, in her own words. And Elodie doesn't pull any punches right from the start. The very first line is, and I quote, "I'm called Elodie Moreau, I'm 32 years old, and I betrayed the man I loved."
Wow. Yeah, that opening line, it just immediately establishes the central conflict, doesn't it? And the whole confessional nature of the piece. It's not a hypothetical. This is her lived experience. She's reflecting on it, probably with some hindsight. So we'll be tracing the events strictly through her perspective, trying to understand how she perceived things as they unfolded and, well, what she later came to understand about herself and her choices.
Exactly. It's her personal accounting, and we're going to unpack it chronologically just as she presents it. So let's start at the beginning. So Elodie takes us back to how she met Jerome. It was at a neighborhood party. She paints this picture, noisy, a bit chaotic, but joyful. It was a world away from her own life then, which was very structured, focused. She was an architecture student, big ambitions. And amidst the mess, there's Jerome sitting on the curb, very down to earth, laughing, stained jeans, warm t-shirt, hands showing like physical work.
Right. And what's striking is how she describes that initial connection. It wasn't some, grand romantic setup. It was simple, incredibly genuine. He just started talking to her, and they kept talking. And she highlights that moment when he walked her home and just took her hand, without hesitation, as if it were natural, as if it were written long ago.
Mm-hmm.
That feeling of effortless connection, a sense of rightness, right from the start.
That detail is so powerful, isn't it? As if it were written.
Mm-hmm.
And the early relationship sounds idyllic. She even calls it almost perfect, almost cliches, walks in the rain, movies in pajamas, talking for hours. But what she really emphasizes is Jerome's support for her dreams, even when he didn't necessarily get the specifics of architecture or her intellectual world. She quotes him saying things like, "You will succeed, you are made for this."
Yes, and that respect for her ambitions and interests, her reading, travel, culture, even when they weren't his interests, that's something she specifically calls out as rare, truly.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have to understand what she cared about to respect that she cared deeply about it.
That's a great point.
And this foundation, of safety, respect, simple happiness, it's key to understanding the crack that comes later.
Right, because they dueled on that. A year in, they move into a small apartment together out of the suburbs. Weekends are spent doing those classic couple things, painting, finding furniture, cooking simple meals together. And she reiterates that feeling of safety, not just physically, but emotionally safe. She describes him as genuinely good. He was just him, a straight, loyal, tender, present man. And she was deeply in love with him. So you have this picture of a really solid, loving, secure relationship.
Mm-hmm. And that brings us to what Elodie describes as the beginning of the subtle fracture. She introduces this with a quiet internal sensation, a small voice asking, what if it wasn't enough?
This is where it gets really interesting, because she's clear that Jerome was still wonderful. He hadn't changed. But the gap was in their shared intellectual and cultural world. He wasn't a reader, didn't connect with her passion for books or exhibitions, preferred football, cars, grilling. Simple differences, right?
Yeah.
On the surface.
On the surface, yes. But Elodie describes how this led to a slight cold sometimes when she'd talk about her ideas or readings. She's careful to say it wasn't him being judgmental. It was more an absence, a subtle, imperceptible distance. You had to be really kind of paying attention to notice it.
That subtlety is crucial. She gives this specific example telling him about Siskind's novel Le Parfum and how the author made smells so vivid. Jerome's response:
"It's cool, your book. Does it make you want to smell things differently?"
Yeah.
And Elodie's internal reaction is telling. It wasn't an answer. It was just an attempt to follow me without really being there. It's an effort, but it completely misses the point she's trying to make about the writing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And here's a crucial insight Elodie shares about this point in her journey. She felt this internal conflict, wondering if he was asking too much. She tried to accept their differences, telling herself she loved him and that was enough. But the key realization was something slowly had cracked. Not our love, not yet, just me.
The fissure didn't start between them. It started within her. This growing awareness of an unmet need for a different kind of connection, one she didn't quite know how to name yet.
Okay, so the crack is forming internally, and then life happens, and it seems to just make everything worse. Elodie gets a big promotion project manager. Professionally, it's a huge success. Jerome is visibly proud. He buys her a simple silver necklace to celebrate. But inside, she feels this strange disconnect, a ball in her stomach, unable to fully smile. She wonders why she feels this way when she's achieved what she worked for.
And that's precisely where the promotion intensifies the underlying issues. Her work becomes more demanding, more intellectually stimulating. Her professional world is expanding rapidly. By contrast, she felt her personal world shrank, or at least the part of her that thrived on that intellectual exploration felt increasingly confined within the relationship.
Right, the practical impact is huge. She's coming home late, they're talking less, and the conversations become purely functional. Shopping lists, bills, the neighbor's cat,
The space for those deeper talks they had early on just evaporates.
Okay.
And you see this distance play out again in another specific evening she recounts. Tired, seeking connection, she finds Jerome watching TV. She tries to talk about literature again, this time Madame Bovary. His response is distant. She's the one who falls in love with lots of people, is that it?
No.
And then he adds, "You're bizarre des fois, but it's mignon," which means you're weird sometimes, but it's cute. While it seems affectionate on the surface, Elodie recognizes this as highlighting that invisible distance, a flaw, not of malice, but of just fundamental non-connection on a level she was increasingly craving.
And that craving leads her to create a separate space for that part of herself online, following cultural accounts, like in quotes from Proust or Camus, collecting phrases. And the crucial part is, she doesn't share these with Jerome. She assumes he wouldn't be interested.
And this act of self-silencing has a cost, which she puts really clearly later. She says, "Each time I held myself back from doing it, a small part of me went out." The estrangement isn't born of conflict. It's this quiet, slow drifting apart, like two roads going in different directions. She feels she's changing, moving onto a different road, and struggles to explain this feeling of being alone near him, needing something he isn't providing. Her coping mechanism: silence and a smile.
That image of the two roads is just heartbreaking. And this internal struggle, the growing distance, it creates this void inside her. She has this strong intuition. This void couldn't remain empty for very long. It feels like a prediction, doesn't it? Like something external is bound to come along and fill that space.
It really does. And that something arrives in part 4, the catalyst. The scene shifts dramatically to a prestigious architects' conference in Paris.
Right. Jerome doesn't come, he justifies it, saying it was too short, she needed to focus on the debates. Convenient reason, maybe?
Perhaps. And it's there, in this environment that fully engages her professional and intellectual self, that she meets Alexandre Duval. He's a senior architect, described as elegant, cultured, and remarkably observant. What makes him stand out immediately is how he sees her. She felt he really saw who you were.
His voice is described as calm, insightful. And during a roundtable discussion, he gives her project genuine attention, not just polite interest. He tells her, "You have a fine view of public space, very human too, that's rare." And her internal reaction shows the impact. No one spoke to me like that, not even me. It's this profound moment of validation.
Yeah, exactly. And this validation quickly blossoms into a deeper connection at the cocktail party. The conversation shifts effortlessly from work to a shared world: literature, design, politics. He talks about building bridges, hopes, spaces of peace, language that resonates with her architectural side, but also speaks directly to that internal void she felt.
And the cultural connection is almost overwhelming for her. He knew Madame Bovary, had read it twice. He loved Proust, Kafka, Woolf, listened to jazz, read philosophy, quoted Camus. All the things she had kept private, online. With him, she felt reborn, fully herself, not needing to silence any part of her mind or soul.
This connection culminates in a walk along the Seine. He offers this quiet, moving observation. "You have a way of seeing things that moves me, like you sketch the world before living it."
Beautifully put.
And then, crucially, "You deserve to be looked at like that." Elodie says these words entered me like a warm blade.
A warm blade. That's a powerful image. Comforting, like finally being understood, but also dangerous, right? Acknowledging the sharpness of the impact and its potential to cut through her existing life.
Precisely.
The contrast hits her that night back at the hotel. She sees Jerome's tender messages, answers quickly, but her mind is just consumed by thoughts of Alexandre.
Yeah.
It's in this moment she realizes something in me had just woken up, something I might no longer control.
And this takes us right into part 5, the start of that slippery slope towards betrayal. After Paris, Alexandre is constantly in her thoughts. She's replaying conversations, his words, his gaze. The contrast with Jerome becomes even sharper. Jerome is still present, affectionate, reassuring, but Elodie feels he didn't really see me anymore. Or maybe, she wonders, it was me who no longer wanted to be seen by him. It's a complex dynamic, isn't it? Her own changing perspective blending with the existing gap.
It really is. And the communication with Alexandre continues. He sends that first message, seems innocent enough. Glad to have met you. We'll work on a joint project soon. But she rereads it, seeing it as an open door.
Yeah, and the messages gradually become more personal. Not overt seduction yet, she notes, but almost. Just enough to keep that door ajar, keep the possibility alive.
This leads to them arranging a meeting after a work event. An empty office, a walk, a small, discreet bar. The deep conversation picks up where it left off in Paris. And he asks her that really penetrating question, what she really wants, not professionally, really.
And his words in response to her struggling to articulate it, they're incredibly significant. He tells her, you need to be understood, not just loved. Elodie says, these words, they pierced me. That's the core insight for her at this moment, the realization that love, while present with Jerome, wasn't meeting that fundamental human need to be deeply understood.
And immediately after that conversation, the kiss happens. Walking slowly, he stops, turns, his eyes shining. She describes it feeling like an obvious truth, both of them knowing it was coming. Her physical reaction is intense, heart racing, blood boiling, but there's also this clear internal voice screaming, what are you doing?
She chooses to silence that voice, leaves without a word, feeling this complex mix, almost guilty, almost proud. Proud of stepping towards this connection, guilty for the way she was doing it.
Yeah, that conflict.
She returns home to find Jerome asleep, his hand resting on a book. She's trembling, can't sleep, acutely aware she'd crossed a line, and she admits, worse still, I knew I didn't want to go back. The desire for what Alexandre represented was already so powerful, the idea of retreating felt unbearable.
Which plunges her straight into part 6, the reality of living a double life. Elodie immediately feels she's become a liar, hiding this fundamental part of herself. She describes this internal split, presenting a smiling, affectionate facade to Jerome, while internally, everything had changed, because now there was a before and an after, a line crossed, a secret buried in my chest.
Alexandre messages her asking to meet again, and she gives in, says yes. The secret meetings continue, progressing to physical intimacy in discreet hotels.
The physical encounter itself. She describes it quite matter-of-factly, nothing romantic, just the two of us locked in the bubble. The desire was violent, obvious, and in those moments with Alexandre, she felt truly alive, more than I had been for a long time.
But the stark reality hits hard when she returns home. The silence is deafening. Jerome is asleep, but she can't get into bed next to him without feeling like she's betraying him a second time. And here she articulates another crucial insight. It wasn't just a body I was hiding from him. It was also a part of my soul.
Right, it wasn't just the physical act.
No. Her concealment went far deeper. She was hiding this entire reawakened self that Alexandre had connected with.
And this leads to that profound, haunting question she asks herself during this period. Because if you manage to love someone and hurt them at the same time, then who are you really? It just encapsulates an immense internal conflict. Still loving Jerome, but pursuing this need that ultimately caused him so much pain. She says, yet I still loved him. That's the worst. I never truly stopped loving him, but it wasn't enough.
The pressure just keeps mounting in part 7, and others start to notice. Her best friend, Marion, who happens to be a psychologist, sees the change in Elodie. Despite Elodie blaming work stress, Marion senses something deeper, describing her as absent, distant.
And Marion is persistent. She asks questions, notices the silences, the way Elodie avoids her gaze. Eventually, she confronts her directly. You're seeing him outside of work, aren't you?
And Elodie just can't deny it anymore.
Marion's reaction isn't anger, apparently, but a heavy sigh, sadness. She tries to reason with Elodie, calling the affair an illusion, a dangerous parenthesis, reminding her that both she and Jerome deserve better.
But Elodie admits she wasn't listening. She was caught in the grip of what Alexandre made her feel, being desired for all that I was, not just loved, not just tolerated, desired. And it was addictive. So addictive. This feeling was so powerful it rationalized the increasing layers of lies, small ones at first, then bigger, more numerous.
And while Elodie is constructing this elaborate facade, Jerome starts to suspect. He doesn't confront her directly, but his silences were heavy, his questions discreet but present. That timid question, Are you happy? She sees the love and the fear in his eyes, and she lies anyway.
Yes, of course.
Oh, that's painful. Yeah. And in that moment, she knows she's likely going to lose everything, but she feels powerless to stop, like people who continue walking even when they know they are going to fall.
And the fall becomes inevitable in Part 8, triggered by exposure. Specifically, blackmail. It happens at work one morning with a colleague named Sandra, whom Elodie describes with a kind of feigned assurance that hid a deep desire to hurt without saying it.
Ooh, not good.
No. Sandra reveals she has proof, a photo of Elodie and Alexandre holding hands outside a hotel sent by a so-called mutual friend.
Oh, no.
Elodie's physical reaction is immediate and visceral. My blood froze.
I bet. Sandra's words are cold, calculating. You really think you can continue like this without anyone seeing anything? Me, I've known for a long time, but now there's proof. And you can imagine what that could cost your career if it fell into the wrong hands.
The demand is simple. Elodie's sponsorship for an internal promotion. Feeling trapped, exposed, her career now on the line, Elodie feels she has no choice. She says yes.
Wow. So the secret has now entangled her professionally, forced her to compromise her integrity in a whole new way.
Exactly. This decision causes immediate surprise at work, and Alexandre, who wasn't fooled by her earlier excuses, confronts her. Why did you do that? She continues lying. Just tired, but she knows he doesn't believe her. The facade is cracking for everyone now, not just Jerome.
The pressure reaches its absolute breaking point at home in Part 9. Jerome comes home early and finds Elodie deleting a message from Alexandre. Her hurried, panicked actions are clumsy. They betray her.
During dinner that night, Jerome's reaction is subtle but loaded. He comments, "You spend a lot of time on your phone lately, but it's different." Elodie's denial is weak. He's outwardly calm, but his eyes said everything. He knows, or at least he has confirmation of his suspicions.
The next morning is the confrontation. Jerome is standing by the sink looking out the window. He confesses he looked at her phone, found an incomplete, half-deleted message involving her and another man. His question is quiet, trembling, filled with both hope and dread. Tell me it's a mistake.
And in that moment, looking at him, Elodie describes feeling profound shame. Not shame of him or even shame of what she was doing, but of what I was becoming.
That's a key distinction.
It is. She lowers her eyes, unable to hold his gaze. And in that simple gesture, he understands. He leaves for work without a word. As Elodie puts it, the fall had begun.
The silence that follows is immense, she says. Heavier than any argument. They exist like shadows, just going through the motions, but the connection is completely severed.
It's Elodie who finally breaks the silence. On a Tuesday, rain falling outside, Jerome on the sofa. A sudden, trembling, "I'm sorry," repeated. His calm response just cuts through all the pretense. "Tell me what I should know."
And she tells him everything. Without detour, without excuses, without trying to justify. She lays out the full truth, Alexandre. The secret meetings, the nights away, the lies, the confused mix of excitation, shame, fear.
After her confession, Jerome asks two core questions that really cut to the heart of it all. First, did you love him? Her answer, honest and painful. No, not like you. Not like I loved you. And then the question she had wrestled with herself. Then why did you do it?
And Elodie's explanation is the culmination of her struggle with that internal void. She tells him, because I needed to be looked at differently, to be understood differently. I didn't want to leave you, but I felt I didn't know who I was anymore when you looked at me. She needed a part of herself to be seen, validated, a part that felt invisible in their relationship.
His quiet response just underscores the tragedy of it all. You could have told me before.
Yeah. Part 10 is the inevitable consequence, the end of their life together. Jerome stands by the window, making his final decision. His words are delivered with this quiet finality. I can't live like this anymore, with someone who doesn't see me anymore, who doesn't tell me the truth.
There's such a deep sadness in this ending, isn't there? It's free of shouting or blame. He tells her, I don't hate you, but I can't be with you. Elodie's tears finally come. He gives her one last embrace, just one last time. His parting words are poignant, and they resonate with her earlier thoughts about being seen. Maybe you deserve what you were looking for, but not with me. He leaves calmly.
Elodie is left alone, feeling lost for the first time. The weight of the truth, the reality of the consequences, hits her fully. It hurt.
Part 11 charts that long, difficult road back the process of healing and understanding. The immediate period after Jerome leaves is just defined by emptiness. Waking up alone, the silent apartment, his things gone, she realizes she hasn't just lost him. She feels she has lost herself completely.
She describes weeks of just floating, moving between work and the empty apartment. Her friend Marion steps in, visiting, pushing her gently, reminding her, you have the right to suffer, but you must also learn to get up.
And Marion offers a crucial suggestion. Therapy. Her reasoning gets right to the heart of Elodie's problem. You need someone to ask you questions you refuse to answer, not to judge, to help you see what you refuse to see.
Smart friend. So Elodie goes to therapy, and slowly things start to make sense, starting to fall into place. It's not a quick fix, clearly, but a process of deep understanding.
Right. She begins to see that her betrayal wasn't driven by malice or a desire to leave Jerome, but was a desperate attempt to regain a part of me that I hadn't known how to protect.
A part that felt misunderstood, neglected, suffocated.
Exactly. And instead of facing the difficulty of communicating that need within her relationship, she chose escape, ease, illusion.
The immediate cost was immense. She lost both men. Alexandre also leaves, feeling used. She's left with just me and all that silence.
So she makes a significant life change, resigns from her demanding job. Not forever, but for time to breathe, to rebuild, to take a break. She moves alone to a quiet seaside village, starting a new routine, walking, reading, and writing, filling notebooks with her thoughts, regrets, and the truths she's uncovering.
A powerful symbol of her processing is the unsent letter to Jerome. It's not a plea for forgiveness, but an articulation of her understanding that her actions weren't a rejection of him personally, but a flawed response to her own internal struggle, her fear of losing who she was, and the painful realization that love, on its own, wasn't enough without feeling seen and sharing fundamental dreams or ways of being in the world.
She eventually returns, and Marion's simple welcome, "You're back, that's something," marks a turning point. Elodie describes herself as not healed, not completely, but I was there, ready to start over, to leave again. She has a new desire to build something, not just for others, for me too.
Part 12 brings us years into Elodie's new life. She lives in a quiet coastal village, and her work has shifted dramatically. She's now in social architecture, focused on accessible housing and community spaces.
Yeah, she says it's less prestigious, but so much more human.
That's telling. She's not in a serious relationship, actively learning to be alone. She shares another key insight from this time. Sometimes you have to learn to be alone before you know how to love again, truly.
Marion still visits and sees the profound change in her friend.
And then, unexpectedly, she sees Jerome again. It happens in the city, in the very same cafe where they first met.
Wow, full circle.
Yeah, he's aged a bit, is smiling, reading. Her reaction is this complex, familiar pain, like listening to an old song. Not regret or longing for what was lost, but a recognition of a significant chapter of her life.
They greet each other politely, like two polite strangers, but the connection runs deeper, and she sits with him naturally. They talk about their lives, about what they've learned since they separated.
Jerome shares his news. He's remarried to a mechanic he met at his factory. They work together and have a son. And his simple statement about his wife is incredibly resonant, especially in the context of Elodie's story. She understands me better than I understand myself, and that's enough.
That hits hard, doesn't it? It highlights the fulfillment he found in a connection built on shared understanding and shared life.
Sure.
Perhaps the very thing Elodie craved but sought in such a destructive way.
Absolutely. Elodie shares her new path, building with more humanity and meaning. He listens attentively, like before, with attention, without judgment. He observes, "You seem calm."
And her response to his observation just encapsulates her entire journey. I'm not healed, but I'm not running anymore.
Yeah.
His nod acknowledges the deep truth in that simple statement. That's already a lot.
They finished their coffees in a silence that was no longer afraid, a silence that soothed. He gives her a gentle kiss on the cheek. They say goodbye, take care, you too, and he leaves. Elodie is left watching the world go by, no longer afraid to follow her own path within it.
In her final reflections, part 13, Elodie distills the core lessons she learned from this incredibly painful experience. Life, she realizes, isn't just about good or bad choices, but about necessary passages, roads that we take even if they lose us, wounds that mark, but which end up healing.
Her current path is described as calmer, less brilliant, but truer. And her final affirmation, echoing the peace she found in no longer running. And that's enough. Wow. Walking through Elodie's story like this, from that initial quiet crack of feeling unseen, through the devastating betrayal and its consequences, to the difficult process of therapy and self-discovery, and finally finding a truer path and a sense of peace, it's incredibly powerful. You really get such a detailed, clear, and precise picture of the emotional landscape and the choices made along the way.
It really underscores the complexity of human connection, doesn't it? The story highlights that critical difference between being loved and being deeply understood, and the profound consequences that can arise when that second need isn't met, or perhaps isn't even articulated. Elodie's journey isn't about excusing her actions, not at all, but about understanding the deeper currents that led her down that destructive road, and finding a way to rebuild an authentic self afterwards. So, based on Elodie's path, here's maybe a thought for you, the listener, to consider. What does it truly mean for you to feel seen in your relationships? And if there's a gap, between being loved and feeling truly understood, what healthy ways can that need be addressed before a quiet crack becomes a devastating fracture?
Powerful questions to sit with. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Elodie's confidences. We hope her story offers you something meaningful to reflect on.